Hi, welcome to the Motion Picture Notion. I'm your host, Gabriel Burton. So, back in 2004, my graduating year, The Grudge came out, the American version of The Grudge starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. Everybody made such a big deal out of The Ring, but I thought that The Grudge was far more terrifying. That little boy, Toshio, just freaked me out. There was even one day back in 2005, I was tripping really hard on mushrooms, and I was having an amazing trip. All these closed-eye visuals of just these different patterns and beautiful stuff, and then all of a sudden my buddy Carlos decided to screw with me, and he went, and then everything just changed. And I remember that a movie reviewer I would read frequently at the time, Susan Granger, she's clearly not the biggest fan of horror movies, and she gave The Grudge a 7, which is, I mean, for her, that might as well be like an A+, a 7 out of 10. So, then I went back and I watched, I found the Japanese version on sale, and I watched it, and it was equally as good. I'd say that the two were very, very comparable, because they actually brought the director of the original Ju-on on to do the American version, and that's why, like, atmospherically, it was just so cool and so well done. Well, flash forward to 2020. Now we have, like I said, that kind of aughts nostalgia going on, so they might kind of maybe bring it back a little bit to the Japanese kind of influenced horror, which personally I think would be awesome, because the Japanese are like, I wouldn't say that they're ahead of us on horror, but they have their own completely unique style, and they really know what they're doing. So The Grudge comes out. Right? And I mean, I'd heard reviews for it. I heard it wasn't that great, so I sort of braced myself. One thing that I did find kind of is the fact that it's 2020, and here you have what appears to be a remake to The Grudge 16 years after the original American one was made. It's kind of like, dude, to quote Letterkenny, it's sort of like, you gotta let the paint dry a little bit. Honestly, I think that, like, you should wait about 30 years before you do a remake to a film, ideally, to give the original like a chance to have its cultural impact and kind of like age and be the representative of its generation that it is supposed to be. Minimum, I would say, like 20 years. Waiting 16 years to reboot a franchise seems kind of dumb. Unless like the franchise just went totally downhill, like obviously I like the new Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, but I digress, I'm getting off track. From the opening of the movie, you see a woman walking out of a very familiar looking house, and she's talking to somebody on the phone, Yoko, who is literally the first person to get killed in the first Grudge. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And there's a caption that says 2004, and I'm like, oh, you see, it's not a remake. And I looked it up after the fact. It's what they call a sidequel. That's bullshit. It's a sequel. It's another Grudge sequel. The basic idea is that a character who passed through that house in Japan comes back to the States and brings the curse with her. It's kind of like similar to what happens in the Grudge 2 and 3, the American versions. But this time it's like all new characters, all new situation, all new house that is now haunted here in the States. And I mean, in its own right, I suppose it is a reboot. It gives them a chance to kind of Americanize it a little bit and make like a whole side thing. I'm gonna be real that like right from the get-go, this movie didn't really hook me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was sort of like it had no heartbeat. It had no pulse. It was like, kind of like the Green Lantern, where, you figure you cast Ryan Reynolds as the lead man, right? It's got to be great, but it wasn't for some reason. There was just no heart to that movie. Everything felt like they were kind of just going through the motion. It did eventually sort of pick back up as the movie went along, and the movie wasn't like all bad. There was a good movie in there somewhere, trying desperately to claw its way out. Atmospherically, like the inside of the house, the darker tones, and just the overall mood of like the camera angles and the lighting. And the acting was competent, and it used the same like sort of system that the original Grudge did, where it shows you there's like 3 or 4 stories within this one movie that intertwine some way. They're all related about these people that have experienced the Grudge, and all of their stories start to unfold piece by piece by piece until you start putting things together. Some people say that was a cop-out and it's just like a way to totally cash in on the first movie. I mean, yeah, but that format I find to be very interesting, and if you bring a little bit of new material into it, it could continue to be very interesting. If you reveal something new with every movie, There you go. But there was nothing really new revealed. One thing that was really great about the movie was Lin Shaye. She wasn't in it for very long, but her performance was great, and she was good and creepy. She's a very underrated actress, and I mean, she has a very long history in horror. Her brother was Robert Shaye, who was the CEO of New Line Cinema back in the 80s. He was the guy who oversaw essentially the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and Lin Shaye plays Nancy's teacher in Class when she has that dream about Tina. You know, plus she's in the Insidious movies. She's a 70-plus-year-old woman, and she's carrying a franchise of horror movies. That's badass, man. Anyways, she was really good, but overall the movie was not. And I think that the biggest thing that really just bothered me, it really got under my skin and not in the good way, is the insane lack of creativity with the ghosts. I mean, like in the original Grudge, like the little cat child was terrifying and totally original. The way the mom moved and kind of like crawled across the floor and that chilling like noise that she made, it was all original and creepy and eerie and cool. And in this version of The Grudge, all the ghosts are just like, they look like zombies. They have like an open jaw and like flies, and like their pigment is darker, and like their eyes are all zombie looking. It's like, it's just terribly unoriginal. It's just not creative at all. They were just going through the motions. It was like they just relied on the name to get this movie by. I think that the director really tried to make a good movie, and like I said, there were good elements there, but in the end it was just so not creative. And that's really kind of a damn shame, because the original Grudge and most of its sequels I thought were actually pretty damn good and pretty damn scary. And I appreciated the fact that they stuck a little bit like more closely to the Japanese lore. So in the end, I'm sad to say it, because you know, like this whole idea of a sidequel or just carrying on the Grudge franchise, I'd have been down. I really would have. But honestly, given the box office for this movie, I don't think that that's gonna happen. And it really is kind of a bummer also, because like Sam Raimi produced this just like he produced the original American version back in the day. And Sam Raimi's great, you know, but I would have thought that he would have had a little bit more of a handle on that, like a little bit more like, nah, this is a little generic. Or it's not like an insult of a movie, but by the same token, it's also not like a bad enough movie that you can watch it and laugh and like make fun of it. It's sort of in this weird state of limbo. It's almost kind of like boring in parts, honestly. It just failed, unfortunately. I'm sad to say it failed, but here's hoping that we get some new good horror movies in 2020. I hear The Invisible Man is really good, and I really want to see it before it's out of theaters, but we'll see where that goes. That's all she wrote.